I have a very disturbing story for you today about guns and race and good guys with guns that we have to talk about. And there is this very racialized pro-gun argument that is sometimes made around people of color and guns. Sometimes you hear this from the pro-gun right when they want to pretend as though the NRA is not an extraordinarily racially tinged organization. And what they say is, this is their argument, not mine, we want everybody to have access to legal guns, including people of color. And the reason it's important for people of color to have legal access to guns is that they are more likely to live in dangerous neighborhoods, and sometimes they have more of a need to defend themselves against other people who are violent. That's sort of the argument that you hear them make. And yet, we rarely hear about the NRA coming to the public defense of black people who had firearms or used firearms for self-defense or merely had guns on them when they had an interaction with the police. We've even had some specific cases we've covered in the last year and a half that I've told you about, where you had legal gun ownership by black Americans that got them into trouble when they were stopped by police. And in many of those, the NRA literally said nothing. That's the sort of pretext, the context. Cut to this weekend in Illinois. 26-year-old black man Jemel Roberson was working security at a bar called Manny's Blue Room in the Chicago suburb of Robbins, Illinois. There was a shooting at the bar, and Jemel Roberson was there working security, like I said. Roberson was able to apprehend the shooter, and when police showed up, they shot and killed the black security guard, Jemel Roberson, who had again apprehended the actual shooter the police were called and were responding to. The officer who killed Roberson is white, and you be the judge of whether that's a factor as we talk about the story. The way that it went down is that Roberson had asked some drunk people at the bar to leave, a common occurrence at bars. One of those drunk people came back with a gun and started shooting. Roberson was able to get the shooter down on the ground with his knee on the shooter's back to prevent him from getting up. And according to what I've read, had taken the shooter's gun and was holding it on the shooter's back along with his knee, waiting for police to arrive. Now, there is one report that says Roberson had his own gun as well as a valid firearms ID card. The other reports say that it was the shooter's gun that Roberson had appropriated for himself. But either way, when police showed up, he had the suspect down on the ground, knee on his back, gun on his back. Police show up and shoot the security guard dead as people were reportedly yelling, "He's security, he's security." The police who are now investigating say that when police showed up, they yelled at the security guard, drop the gun, and eventually shot him dead. They also say that part of the confusion was that Roberson wasn't wearing any clothing that identified him or indicated that he was working security, although there is a conflicting report which says he had a hat that said security. At the same time, a lot of people just wear hats that say security or shirts that say security. That's become popular. So where that plays into this is not totally clear right now. A lawsuit has been filed claiming that Roberson's civil rights were violated. This now is going to extend for a long time with this legal case. And also notable here and tragic is that the actual shooter in the initial bar shooting, as of this morning, hadn't yet been charged. So my question is, where's the NRA on this? Roberson had a valid federal firearms identification card. He did not have a concealed carry license. We heard from the Midlothian, Illinois police chief. What we have learned is Jemel Roberson was a brave man who was doing his best to end an active shooter situation at this bar. So what are we to make of this, Pat? Because the defenders of the police are saying, listen, police were called to an active shooter situation. They show up and a man is kneeling on another man's back with a gun pointed at him. Any reasonable police officer would say, oh, we were called to a shooting. We see a guy with a gun. That's the shooter. Let's do something about it. But is it actually that simple? If the officer had been black or the security guard white, would it have played out the exact same way? And I don't deny for a second, Pat, and you come from a law enforcement family, Pat, there's no question that a quick judgment has to be made by police in these situations. And the issue here is whether that quick judgment was in any way influenced by race. And I don't know whether we will ever actually have that answer.
Well, certainly the NRA doesn't want to cross paths with law enforcement because they do make up its base of supporters. But I mean, there are many examples. This is just the latest one. 2 years ago, Philando Castile, a black man driving in Minnesota, was pulled over by a white police officer. And he did the right thing, Philando Castile did. He said that I have a gun on me. I just want to make sure that you know. And then he reached for, I don't know if it was his phone or his license and registration. He reached for something, and the cop said, don't reach for it, and shot him dead. So his civil rights were also violated. No due process there. He followed the formula for what you're supposed to do if you're pulled over and you have a gun on you, and yet he was shot dead. And the NRA stayed silent on that one, too.
I want to hear from you about this. What do you make of it? We are going to be posting some comments that we receive on this story on the David Pakman Show Instagram page, at David Pakman Show. While you're there, you can follow me at david.pakman. We will take a quick break and be back after this with our investigation into what is the solution to the social media free speech deplatforming problem that many say we have. That's next.